When I was at Morgan Park High School, I played in the band. They moved me around. I started at trumpet. I wasn't terribly good. What else would you like to do? I moved to the drums. What else would you like to do? I ended up on the tuba. I was a mean tuba player in the Morgan Park Empehi marching band. And because it was during the days of the Revolution and a lot going on in America, and Jimi Hendrix was out there, I picked up the electric guitar on the side, and I really did well with that. But one day during this conflict, many of the students were unhappy with the way in which the school and many schools in America were failing to acknowledge Dr. King and his sacrifice. I was a student when Dr. King was assassinated and saw our world turned upside down at Morgan Park. And I was one of the student leaders that led a protest. And we walked out of school. Dr. Shingles, I've never admitted this in public, so please forgive me. But I want you to know that I got in trouble that day. My parents were disappointed. My mother came to the office of the principal, Mr. James Moore, and Mr. O'Bannon, who was the vice principal. And they said, your son will have to leave Morgan Park. We're sending him to Finger. And I sat there with tears about to appear, and my mother began to cry. She said, will you give him one more chance? I promise this boy will do the right thing. My father was angry with me. My community was disappointed and ashamed of me. I wasn't a great student in my first 2 years, a C student just coasting along, waiting for a turning point. When they expelled me and then permitted me to come back on probation, you have to sit alone in the cafeteria, you have to study. Sisters and brothers, I took that as my turning point. I said, I'm going to read every single book in this library. I'm going to prove them wrong. And I don't know if that library is still there, but I want you to know I read every book in the old library. I didn't read it from cover to cover, but I knew something of everything in every book. It was a turning point. I got in trouble. It was a turning point, and from that day forward, teachers, Miss Sue Ackerman, and other leaders, I met Mr. Martin today who mentioned her name. They said, we see potential in him. They said, you should be in honors classes. Put him up. And at every opportunity I received, I did my best. Till finally, on graduation day, I was headed to Morehouse College. And who knew that a boy that got in trouble at Morgan Park, growing up on the south side of Chicago, 36 years later, would be installed as president of Morehouse College. So I return as a graduate, as a Mustang, to say thank you, Morgan Park. You changed my life. You were my turning point. You made a big deal out of the little things. And as I take my seat, remember this story. You never know when someone is watching you. The story is told of a young man who was preparing to become a missionary in a foreign land. There was 2 years required of study. He read foreign languages, he studied music, he did all of his studies, and then finally, he reached that point where it was time for his exam. When it came for his exam, the night before, a great snowstorm came. And he had to walk, he could not drive to get to the office 5 miles away. He made it there, his scheduled exam was 9 a.m., he was there at 7:30. He sat, nobody acknowledged him. Finally, 9 a.m. came, no one said a word. 10 a.m. passed, nothing. Finally, at 11 o'clock, they came out and they said, it's now time for your exam. He walked in and they said, first of all, what is the sum of 4 plus 4? He said, 8. What is the sum of 10 plus 3? 13. They closed the book. You passed the exam. Couldn't understand. He'd been studying languages and medicine and all of these subjects. They said, first of all, we tested you on perseverance. You had an excuse to turn around because of the snowstorm, but you pressed your way, you passed that test. Secondly, we tested you on promptness. You had an excuse not to arrive on time, but we noticed you arrived early. Third, we tested you on patience. We made you wait several hours, and you didn't get a bad attitude. And finally, we tested you on humility. We know you've been studying hard, but we asked you questions a little child could answer. And finally, after you passed the test on perseverance and patience and promptness and humility, you're exactly the one we want to represent us in the world. Remember that the world is equally balanced between good and evil, and your next act will tip the